Polus Masa Bay was quiet this time of year, but you were still met with sunlight and clear skies. It was great to get out of the city for a bit and enjoy a little fresh air, but to be invited by Hitoshi Shinsou was a surprise. You recalled the phone call while you were at work, having finished an interrogation session for another law enforcement case. His opening words still stuck with you to this day.
Hey kid, how do you feel about sand?
You cracked a smile while you leaned onto your hands, laying on the large picnic rug that Shinsou had packed for the trip. You also weren't surprised for the large oversized umbrella that covered a majority of the blanket underneath. It was expected that Shinsou wasn't a big fan of the beach sun. Still, the invitation, though odd and abrupt, was really a mission away from home. And Shinsou thought it best to take you on the trip to assist, after going through some paperwork to assign you. The train trip to the bay was your briefing, after he advised you to travel light so as not to drag your feet. You chuckled inwardly at the thought, remembering the papers that were strewn across the table, and the faces of the people that you had to keep an eye for, especially one that was masked in particular, the assassin that held you captive for that heated moment back on your mission. Shinsou's briefing entailed all the details about the Tartarus prison break and 10 suspects that were involved, including that assassin. The circumstances of the prison break at least highlighted what type of quirks were involved, but not all suspects were highly detailed. When you asked about the reason behind the trip to Polus Masa Bay, Shinsou continued to elucidate some witness accounts and sightings of a few individuals at the location, and that the goal for this mission was to keep track of their whereabouts. Until there was more information on this splinter group, the both of you were refrained from approaching them for apprehension. The clinking of glass caught your ear, looking up to find Shinsou holding 2 tall glasses in hand. You took one from him, thanking him while he made himself comfortable next to you. Watching the surf and the waves gently washing onto the shore was relaxing after a whole day of surveillance in the bay. Shinsou felt it best to take some R&R. You sipped your drink only to recoil from a slight bitterness in its aftertaste.
Ugh, what did you get?
You asked while you sipped the drink, attempting to guess the taste.
Granddaddy Shandy.
He slowly answered.
Really?
You piped through stifled laughter.
Did you just ask the bartender for a suggestion?
They don't have espresso martinis. Sue me.
He spoke, bluntly while he sipped his own drink.
This is great though.
You commented before placing the drink safely into the sand.
The fresh air, the sound of the sea. It's starting to grow on me.
Sounds like you've never been to a beach before.
What, and you have?
You cocked a quizzical brow at Shinsou, earning a deadpan stare from him. Out of most ideas for a date, or even time to spend together, beaches were never on the radar. This was the irony of this working holiday being out in Polus Masa Bay. If it wasn't for this mission for Shinsou's agency, the choice of being here wouldn't have been on the forefront of either of your minds. You peered out into the bay, watching the number of yachts and dinghies that floated on the rolling waters. It was picturesque.
You think they're doing okay out there?
You asked, catching Shinsou's attention.
Who?
You know, Bakugo.
You replied, spotting the roll of Shinsou's eyes before he laid his bare back onto the picnic blanket.
Oh, come on, aren't you just a little curious?
You don't need to read my mind to know my answer.
You glanced towards Shinsou's relaxed form, his head cradling in his hands while his chest rose and fell with every deep breath. Ever since he successfully transferred into Class 1A, he had slowly grown to become friendlier, but his concept of friends was still laxed. Still, for once throughout this trip he looked serene, not uptight and wound up about the surveillance mission, especially because of one suspect on the list. Shinsou was fervent to locate all of the suspects his agency had enlisted him to track. News of that prison break had been on the radar of most hero agencies, and after the encounter that the both of you had reported, the mission to follow through with their arrest rested on his agency. Though you felt the same with as much intent as he held, having been under duress during that commission's operation, it elated you to see him take a moment. Okay, sure. Bakugo is difficult.
Understatement of the year.
But he's genuine, you concluded. I think he'll do great. Shinsou stared up at the sky, partly obscured by the umbrella he planted in the sand. Aside from the work that needed to be done, he felt some reprieve just being with you. Someone he was familiar with, and more so someone who was just as close to this operation as he was. Still, it was a surprise yesterday during his walk through the bay that he bumped into Bakugo's significant other on his way back to the hotel, which ended up an invitation to lunch with the couple. That was an interesting and slightly awkward encounter.
I hate to agree.
He replied, chuckling and smirking at the thought.
He'll do fine. Still can't believe he asked for advice.
Wait, he did? You asked, your interest piqued. You stared at Shinsou's face, trying to read his expression, only to see that smirk, his tired eyes looking into yours for a brief moment. And you're not going to tell me, aren't you?
You could read my mind, kitten.
He coaxed, watching your face pout in response. You definitely could. If your curiosity was itching you, you could. But with that temptation, you turned away from Shinsou, staring out into the bay instead. Stop it. While you stared out into the waters, one yacht caught your eye, its sails shifting in the wind before you spotted its crew members scrambling across its deck. You shifted yourself on the blanket, focusing on the yacht before one member of its very minimal crew fell overboard. You stifled a laugh while Shinsou watched your smile turn into a grin, amused by the entertainment happening out on the water. Shinsou's form of entertainment was not just relaxing with you, it was you, watching the smallest movements you made and smiling at someone else's unfortunate misery. He was aware you were peeking at the scene that was unfolding out in the bay, but as cynical as he thought about the circumstances of your entertainment, he couldn't help but smile up at you. What is it? You asked, still with a beaming grin.
Nothing.
He replied with a smirk. You rolled your eyes and laid yourself on the blanket next to him, making yourself comfortable atop the warm sand. After watching from afar, your amusement was satiated, smiling to yourself while you stared up into the sky above. I just hope Toka's alright, you commented, your mind drifting to the black cat the both of you left behind at your apartment. It's been 2 days now?
She'll be alright. We asked a friend to check on her anyway.
You felt the need to stifle a chuckle at Shinsou's reassurance, considering the choice the both of you agreed upon when assigning who would be visiting the apartment to care for Toka. However, the thought suddenly dawned on you, recounting who you agreed upon and the choice of words Shinsou just uttered.
Wait a minute. Did you just call Kaminari a friend?
You were only met with the sound of the waves crashing on the shore, with a few seagulls cawing in the wind, before your smile widened with joy.
Oh my god,
Don't.
Kaminari's your friend!
A disgruntled sigh curdled from Shinsou's throat before he rolled over on the blanket, turning his back on you. A pout pulled on his face before he felt your fingers poking at his sides, flinching every now and then from your touch.
You have a friend! I'm so proud of you!
You teased lightly. You couldn't contain the smile on your face. There was consideration to take Toka along with the both of you on this trip, but sadly the hotel did not accept pets, even for anyone of pro-hero or government status. However, after deliberating about Toka and living arrangements while the both of you were away, you had suggested to ask for anyone either of you knew that was trustworthy enough to feed her over the weekend. Needless to say, your first option was a bust, after learning that they had organized a day trip to go hiking. You had suggested Kaminari after mulling over options, considering that he had delved into more work responsibilities, had a regular schedule, and was the only one that didn't have any major plans during the days of this mission. Shinsou laid on the blanket thinking of the same thing, almost regretting his choice of words. The poking had yet to stop.
I can't believe you admitted it. I am so happy that you can actually say that you have a friend!
In a flurry, Shinsou rolled over, taking you by surprise before he trapped you between his arms, hovering over you. His hair hung messily above you, draped in this violet canopy, until he stared into your surprised eyes. He had finally ceased your teasing, his hands floating beside your head while his fingers lightly tangled in your hair. You caught the shadow of his smirk on his lips, drilling his lazy yet intense gaze into yours.
I can't.
You heard in your mind.
I can't deal with hell. With you.
Your eyes widened, hearing those words echo in your head, but more so that you actively used your quirk to listen to what he had to say. You broke your gaze from him, slightly ashamed for using your quirk when the panic finally settled.
I wanted you to hear that, kitten,
reassured Shinsou before you glanced back at him. His fingers brushed through your hair, pulling a few strands away from your face before he lowered his lips just shy above yours. Your hands instinctively reached for his chest. Your fingers pressed against his skin, while his breath warmed your neck. He planted his lips gently atop your skin, its brushing sensation tickling you underneath your ear. You invited him in while you wrapped your arms around his body, pulling him in to lay atop you, his warmth comfortably protecting you from the chill of the sea breeze.
I love you. You know that, right?
He whispered.
I don't need to read your mind to feel that.
You replied with a smile, hugging into him. A sigh washed onto your neck when the familiar tone of Shinsou's phone interrupted the both of you. Despite the disappointment, you patted Shinsou's back, submitting to surrender, and collectively agreeing to continue this conversation at a later date. As quickly as he had trapped you, he released you, rolling over to grab his phone not too far from the blanket. Shinsou's call, by the few words you caught, was from his agency about the current mission, while you breathed a sigh of relief. The heat from his body had dissipated from your skin, but your heart continued to pound against your chest. Moments like these were far and few in between. But you knew when Shinsou was playful, he meant it. And you knew that it wasn't the end of it.